Let's get on the throttle. My name's Carl Schlacht, former supercross and motocross racer, going bagger racing this year. We created Throttle for a place to learn about baggers, find out all the tips and tricks to get out there bagger racing. Throttle's brought to you by Browen's Furniture, West Michigan's premier Amish showroom located in Allendale, Michigan. Now, for over 6 decades, Browen's Furniture has been the go-to place for the highest quality American-made upholstery and Amish crafted wood furniture. Experience the timeless elegance and superior craftsmanship that sets them apart since 1955. On today's show is Tony Tucker. He's a bagger racer. He owns a performance shop, Tucker Speed. They're your performance bagger headquarters in Utah. Tony Tucker, how you doing? You ready to get on the throttle?
I'm ready, man.
What do you guys do over there at Tucker Speed?
Here at the shop, we do a lot of stuff. We specialize in Harley Davidsons. We do everything from your standard oil changes, tire changes, stuff like that, to performance motor builds and race bikes and stuff like that. So, and everything in between.
Obviously, that's how you got into bagger racing, just building Harleys, trying to go fast, and then you got out on the track. How'd you get into racing?
Well, I grew up racing motocross and desert racing, drag racing, a little bit of stuff when I was young. And, then when I grew up, I went into the motorcycle industry and became a Harley mechanic. And, I kind of had quit racing, as I got into my 20s and had, a family and a wife and kids, and was just working at a dealership doing my thing. And, always wanted to get back to racing. So I started racing a little motocross again, and that didn't end well. I got hurt a couple times, and it's kind of hard to be a mechanic with broken arms. So then I opened my shop here, and that's when I not that I didn't know it existed, but that's kind of when I got into flat track racing, and the Harley kind of hooligan flat track thing became a big deal, and I got into that, and it was cool because I could race something that I also worked on, and it made sense. So I raced flat track for a couple of years on a hooligan Sportster. Did that for about 4 or 5 years. I still do it occasionally here and there. And then BRL came around, Bagger Racing League became a thing. And that actually kind of aligned with my business more so than flat track, because I wasn't really working on flat tracks. Flat track doesn't exist in Utah. It was cool because it was a Harley, but I wasn't really generating a ton of work for me. At Bagger Racing League came about, and it was like I could build a performance bagger that goes out on the track, and a lot of that stuff I can come back to the shop and sell or install these performance parts on a guy's street motorcycle, and it works. So yeah, that's kind of the short story.
So when you say you built a bagger, there's a lot of people that don't even know, or like myself, I'm new into the Harley world. I know dirt bikes, and kind of why I'm transitioning, similar to you, getting banged up really bad on dirt bikes. So we'll give something else a shot. So when you're building a bagger, what bike is good to start with? What are some of the things that we can do to these bikes? And what are the different classes, that we can get into?
Yeah. So, a bagger is kind of a slang term in the world. If you're outside the world and if you're not familiar, a full dressed bike is another slang term, but basically, a Harley Davidson road glide or a street glide is the best platform for us to start with. You have like the ultra classic, and it's got all the bells and whistles, the full tour pack, and a lot of extra chrome bars and stuff like that. You could start with that, but it just means you got to tear a bunch of stuff off. So, from the Harley side of things, a Harley road glide or a Harley street glide is a perfect platform to kind of begin with. Or even in my case with my BRL bike, it actually started life as a Road King, which is basically the same bike as a road glide, but without a fairing. Um, I figured if I'm going to buy a bike and have to tear all the stereo and speakers and everything out, I might as well just buy one without all that stuff. And then I just built a bracket and mounted the Road Glide fairing to it to make it, look like a Road Glide. But if you check the VIN number, it's technically a Road King. So, in the first early years of BRL, when I started back in like 2020, 2021, whenever it was, we had two classes. We had Bagger GP and Pro Stock Bagger. And I originally started building my bike with the intent of putting a road racer on it. I had never road raced. And I was thinking, well, I'll just build the bike and I'll find a rider to ride it for me, and we'll go race in the Bagger GP class, because the Bagger GP is for a kind of higher level rider. Then I started building the bike, and I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'll ride it. We'll see how I can do on a road course. So we went and got into the Pro Stock class. And I think at that time, my bike was probably heavily built compared to some of the other bikes in the Pro Stock class. It followed the rules, but it was, a well-equipped bike for the early years of bagger racing.
Was that an M8 or a twin cam? So the older bikes, right, pre-2017 would be a twin cam, and then the more modern engine is the M8. What were you running?
We started with an M8. I knew that, just through our shop here, that M8 was the way to go. Like, it's just almost unfair to put an M8 against a twin cam. Even, I think even if you're matching cubic inches, like if you say you have a 124 M8 and a 124 twin cam, the M8 is still a better performing motor. So I knew from the get-go that M8 was the way to go. So that's what I started. My bike's a 2017, so the first year of the M8.
What kind of parts did you start to put on your bike, and then that just probably led to more, I'd imagine?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, those early years, we didn't know a lot. We did know that we needed to get the bike high in the air to avoid, scraping and dragging parts. So originally my bike was probably 2 inches taller than stock. For the very first race we did here in Salt Lake. I was still scraping parts at that first round. So we came back, and after that race, we went even taller. We went 5 inches taller than stock.
What parts were scraping?
For me, I was scraping my exhaust on the right side, and then my primary cover on the left side.
Was that a stock primary?
Stock primary. Yeah.
What exhaust did you have on there? What style?
The early years, I had a Vance and Hines short 2-into-1 exhaust. It was actually one that was supposed to be for a Softail that I had kind of moved to fit, because I was running mid-control foot controls, because that's another thing that we changed is these baggers come stock with floorboards that are, all the way forward. It's not a very racy, position to be on the bike. So I was running mid controls, but in those early years, there wasn't very many exhaust pipes that worked with the mid control foot controls. So I found an exhaust that would work with the mid controls, and then I had to adapt it to fit the frame.
Yeah, now they're making pipes for mid controls,
right.
All kinds of parts that are coming out. Like
yeah,
so
many parts that have come out of racing these baggers. Everything from suspension to foot controls to exhaust. I mean, obviously, we've always been making performance engine parts, but as far as setting the bike up to like really handle and stop properly, that this stuff is all really new to the Harley industry. I mean, I've been in the Harley industry now for 20 years. And, I tell people all the time, I worked in the dealership for a long time. And if someone would have came into the dealership 10 years ago and said, I want to raise my Road Glide 2 inches taller than stock, we probably would have laughed him right out of the dealership. And now it's the opposite. Everybody's going tall. And if you're going low, I mean, there's still dudes building low riders, but the trend is go tall so you can, lean into a corner and ride aggressively and be, a little more sporty. So it's cool to see the evolution of it.
As far as, braking, that I'd imagine that's pretty important in bagger racing. I guess 700 pound motorcycle. How important are the brakes, or are like stock Harley brakes good enough? What do we need to do there?
I mean, they're good, but they're not good enough for a track. You know what I mean? They're good for canyon run and stuff like that. But yeah, you get out on a track and yeah, it's a heavy motorcycle. And I think the big difference that I found, from never riding a road course track to riding it, and then just talking to people that have never ridden a road course, is the amount of torture that the brakes go through during a race. If you think about running through the canyon, you're not really going to be putting those brakes to the test. You're not going from 120 miles an hour down to 30 and then back up to 100 miles an hour and then back to 30, constantly back and forth, you know what I mean? Yeah, you can ride aggressively through the canyons, but it's still pretty leisurely. On the road course, you start testing the brakes. So yeah, we're basically adapting, sport bike braking technology onto these Hardys, radial calipers, big, 320 millimeter rotors that can handle the heat and have the stopping power. And even still, the sport bike stuff, that stuff's all designed for a sport bike that weighs, 300 pounds. We're out there at 600 to 700 pounds. So there's even had to have been adaptation to those brakes to handle the weight. So yeah, I think braking is probably one of the biggest upgrades that you would need to build a race bike.
Now I see a lot of different styling. There's been some street glides out there. There's a lot of road glides. What's the difference there?
The fairing is the difference. Other than that, behind the fairing, the frame and the geometry and everything underneath it is identical. The frame on a road glide is stationary. It's bolted to the frame, so when you turn your handlebars, it does not move. With the street glide, or what some would call a batwing fairing, it's mounted to your front forks or your triple trees, and so when you turn your front handlebars, the fairing's going to go with you. And I think that, at high speeds and cornering, that electric glide fairing or street glide fairing, you get some input into your front end and steering because of the wind and the drag and everything on it. So I think that through road racing, we found that the road glide seems to work better for this application.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of guys are running the road glide. You don't see the street glide anymore.
Not as much. And I think that that's just been something that we've found out through a few years of racing, that, there's better input on handling without taking a fairing and all the wind input and stuff like that, kind of trying to push or pull in one direction or another on the front end. So, yeah.
And then you're raising them up. So you're putting different forks on. What are you doing in the rear to raise the rear up?
That was another thing that had to evolve. Because when I first built my bike, I went 2 inches taller in the back, just with a taller shock. I went to a 14-inch shock. I was using Legends at the time. I still have Legends on the race bike. Those bikes come with like 12 or 12 and a half inch shocks stock. So I had 14s on there. And with the stock swing arm, that was about the max you could go without the swing arm hitting. The swing arm couldn't swing down anymore without hitting, the frame or transmission and things like that. They just weren't designed to go tall. And then I even had an alloy art swing arm, and it was kind of the same thing. 14-inch tall shocks were max, because before Bagger Racing League, nobody was going anything more than that. So I ended up modifying my swing arm in-house so that I could go to a 16-inch shock And I think that companies like Alloy are now building their swing arms. They've modified and made new versions of their swing arm that allow that right out of the box now. Just kind of another continued evolution of the sport trickling into parts in the catalog.
Yeah, Robbie and those guys at LAR, I mean, they're making a ton of parts, always coming out with new stuff, and they look like pieces of artwork,
For sure.
you know?
There's nothing more sexy than these race parts. I mean, they're totally cool and just beautiful, like works of art that, sometimes you bolt it on this race bike and you take it out on the racetrack and then just totally destroy them. Right. But that's the beauty in it all. Like, some of these, aluminum and titanium and carbon fiber pieces that are just beautiful. And then we go out and just absolutely destroy them and test their limits.
And your bike looked pretty cool. It was neon and blue and white. What made you go with that?
Well, like I said, I grew up as a motocross kid, and there was an old motocross movie, and one of the famous racers said that you can't go fast unless you look cool. And I've always kind of just dug that, and I was like, if we're gonna build a race bike, we got to make it look like a race bike. And I'm a big MotoGP fan, and I was like, well, if we're gonna look cool, we might as well try and look like Valentino Rossi, and he's always ran that neon yellow. So I figured we'll go neon yellow and blue. At least we'll look fast, even if we're not. So that was kind of the inspiration there.
You could always see you on the track, that bright blue bike coming. Mm-hmm. There's nothing worse as a spectator to see a black, 5 different black bikes out, yeah, or maybe a little bit of color on them. So those Joe at Suburban, mm-hmm, their team, they always have really bright bikes, your bike. So I really, that's really sweet to have the bright bikes. It's kind of like motocross. Your parents would get you the bright helmet so they could see you.
Yeah. Kind of the same thing. That was my mindset. Like, if we're going to go out there and race, I'm sure there's going to be a ton. I mean, you go to any Harley rally and there's a sea of black motorcycles. Like, let's build a bike that is recognizable from a mile away. And that was the intent.
How did it feel on the track? What were you going through lap after lap? What'd that feel like?
It's amazing, man. I mean, me and my group of friends, we've always, before racing on the track, we've always, we have a lot of canyons in our area. So we'll run up the canyons and we're always pushing the limits of, going through this corner or going through that corner pretty fast and leaning over. And we used to thought we were really cool. And then you go ride a track and you're like, oh man, this is the real deal. And what the really cool part is, on a racetrack, you can really focus on yourself and the motorcycle and the racetrack, and then not think about anything else. Because, you go out through the canyons or down the interstate or whatever, there's so many other factors you got to think about, other traffic, animals, or, maybe road debris, sand in the corner, stuff like that. And so you're trying to, you got to kind of take it easy because you don't know what's around the next corner. On a racetrack, exactly. And you start doing lap after lap, and you can really just start to focus on going into a corner and how does it feel if my body position is here, or how does it feel if I go through it this way? And it's really cool to see the progression. I mean, all through the BRL, every year, every racetrack I would go to, it's like you go out on the racetrack the first time, and then every time you go out on the racetrack, you're getting faster and faster because, it's the first time I rode the track, and then you get used to it and you start picking up seconds here and there. And it's just a blast to be able to push the limits and not have to worry about a car pulling out in front of you or a deer jumping out in front of you. You just go out there, ride as fast as you can, and not worry about that stuff.
Absolutely. After riding, you want to take a break, right? So you need some new furniture. You want to head over to Browen's Furniture when you're in Michigan. I'm sure they could ship stuff out to you. It's handmade here in the U.S. since 1955. We're not talking IKEA stuff, Tony. This is handcrafted Amish crafted wood furniture from the highest quality American made upholstery. And, they're right by Gingerman. So maybe when you're at that's the second round, you pick up some furniture while you're out there. So we want to thank Browen's Furniture out of Michigan, Western Michigan's premier Amish showroom. If you're out that way,
Right on. We'll have to check it out for sure.
your biggest competition out there, who were you battling with?
In my BRL career, if you want to call it that, the person I probably battled with the most has been Arnie Wells. It seems like no matter what, from the very first BRL race to every race, we just find a way to find each other on the racetrack. We've always been very similar in speed, and Arnie's a really good friend of mine. And off the track, we've always helped each other, given each other riding tips, or hey, how are you getting through this section so fast? But then when we get out on the racetrack, we both want to go out there and win. Arnie's an amazing racer, an amazing rider. And, I've learned a lot from him, but I've had some of the best battles with him out on the racetrack. So yeah, I'd say he's probably been who I've battled with the most and kind of been my rival, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, Arnie races for the Suburban Motors team, Sly Fox team, and he got the #1 plate at Daytona this year. I know he'll be defending that at Mid-Ohio during Vintage Days. They'll be racing baggers on Saturday, so that's pretty exciting. AMA is being involved with all this, and Sly Fox is doing a drifter cross event there, which is another new sport. What do you think of that?
I think it's cool. I mean, the stunt scene and the stunt game has been, happening for quite a few years now. So it's cool to see the next evolution of it, to see them pushing the limits. And I dig that it brings in a racing aspect to it a little bit, where there's, it's like there's time involved. It's not just going out and just pulling some stunts now, but there's a little bit of maybe strategy, or I got to, get through this corner a certain way. So it's, mixing stunt and racing, and it's a really cool show.
Another thing they're doing is setting bikes up, I'd imagine, just for that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it will continue to evolve as a sport, and you'll probably see an evolution of parts trickle into the mainstream and into the parts catalog from that series as well.
Now, you're a seasoned veteran performance bagger racer. I didn't see it the last round of last year. Are you going to make a comeback this year?
Unfortunately, I'm not this year. I injured my leg last fall racing flat track. And it was a pretty bad injury. My leg's pretty messed up. I'm still healing from it now. And so we're coming up on round 1 here pretty quick, and my leg is not going to allow me to race just yet. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to take this summer off of racing. I'm super bummed about it, but there's not much I can do about it at this point. My leg just isn't going to allow it.
Yeah, definitely. The injuries with any dangerous sport like this, we got to take the time off. And Tony, we want to thank you for all you've done for bagger racing. And how do we get a hold of you? Where can we find you on social media to talk about if we need parts, make our Harleys for the track, or just faster in general?
Yeah, for sure. You can find us. I mean, definitely check out our website, tuckerspeed.com. It's full of all the performance related parts needed. There's a chat forum on there. You can jump on and shoot us a message. Find us on Instagram at tucker_speed.com. We're on Facebook. Email us, give us a phone call here at the shop. All that information's on the website. But yeah, we'd definitely love to answer any questions on how to get your bike set up and performing like it should.
Great talking to you, Tony. Stay on the throttle, all right?
Will do, man. Appreciate the time.